Other people say that a way to avoid the First World War is perhaps to remember the Latin tag "Si vis pacem, para bellum." If you would have peace, prepare for war. Some people say that if Britain had entered a full military alliance with France and then accepted the Lord Roberts plan for conscription to create a large British army in peacetime, then this could have dissuaded Germany from starting a war. But this was simply not practical politics for Edwardian England. Now, maybe Britain could have accepted the offer of Bethmann-Hollweg on the 29th of July, but it was not an honest offer, and it would have led, indeed, to a dark future. But maybe instead of hostility to Germany, Britain could have tried to befriend Germany much earlier. Indeed, a British-German alliance had been proposed in 1901 to 1902, Joseph Chamberlain's plan. Now, Germany was highly reluctant to get an alliance with the British and did not take it seriously. They also often offended the British and their government. Now, with all its grandeur, Joseph Chamberlain's vision of the future was ill-informed by history. Had Britain and Germany each overcome their hesitation and entered into an alliance, then Russia and France inevitably would have been forced to come to terms with the triple, or rather now quadruple, alliance of Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. Germany, as the senior dominant partner, would have ruled over Europe. Britain, on all future issues, would have been forced to defer to Berlin. England would have had no choice. The Royal Navy would have been helpless against the combination of military and naval power arrayed against it. In reaching out to Germany, Chamberlain had ignored a centuries-old precept of English history. To survive and prosper, England must always ally herself with the weaker powers or powers of Europe. Otherwise, allied to the stronger power, England finds itself in a subordinate role, her interests and independence subject to the dictates of the strongest power. Only by rallying the weaker states into opposition to the strongest power can England prevent continental hegemony and preserve her own security. This was the lessons taught when England had created alliances against Philip II of Spain, King Louis XIV of France, and Napoleon, but it was a lesson that Joseph Chamberlain had forgotten. Ultimately, for all the horrors of the First World War, the First World War had been necessary. The Germans had been determined to start a war. There would have been no way of appeasing them short of handing them dominance of the continent of Europe and ultimately the globe. They were determined that they were going to rule Europe. There was no peaceful way of stopping that. They could have been dealt with earlier. Had Europe known what was coming, they could have armed themselves to resist German expansion, but you cannot blame the people of Edwardian England for wanting to preserve the peace and to devote their time, effort and money on pensions, education and the liberal reforms rather than grand military projects. They had trusted that nobody in their right mind would push civilized Europe into such a war. Unfortunately, they were wrong. The Germans were bent upon war and would only be stopped after the most trying of struggles across the trenches of the Western Front. Thank you.